This will be an introduction to a quick flow through advanced projects. We will go through the steps of creating a new project, doing a bit of planning with a Gantt scheduler, budgeting for the project, doing some resource planning, tracking time in the timesheet, approving that time, tracking expenses with a purchase invoice, entering an expense sheet and improving that, and finally we will get to invoicing. Let's start out with creating a new project. For that we will use our project wizard. From the project wizard I will select a template from my list of project templates and I'll give the project a name. I'll select a customer from the list of customers and I will select a project manager from my list of project managers. On the next page I will select some dimension values, and when I'm done with that I can finish off and I get my new project created for me. In the project plan, I can see a header section with some details. I get a fact box bar with some additional information about the projects. That could be deadlines or events. It could be a list of the project members. Could be different project attributes. General project information that defines the project and describes it, but does not directly drive the business processes or affect the invoicing. I also have a subform with all the tasks that we are going to perform. These are pre-filled from the task template that is included in the project template. To start preparing the project and getting a high-level plan, I will use the Gantt chart functionality. That allows me to set the start and end dates of each of the activities, and so I can do that with drag and drop functionality. We can specify that we have a specification phase. Following the specification phase, we might have a client meeting, so we create a dependency. After the client meeting, we will start a development phase. The development phase will take some time, so we will drag that out, and so on and so forth, connecting each of the tasks. This is general planning capabilities similar to those that you see in Microsoft Project, and it's easy to use and gives you a good overview. As we get through the process of planning, we can also use this to check how far we are with planning and how well the planning aligns with the initial plan we have here. Now that we have an initial plan, we can start budgeting for this project. For the budgeting, I will use a budget matrix. In the budget matrix, I get a timeline for the project. In this case, due to this being a very small project, I've decided to outline this as a weekly budget. I could also select it as daily, monthly, quarterly, or yearly. And I see my timeline down here. I'll define what I will budget for. In this case, I will budget on a group level, meaning I will not select a specific named individual. Instead, I will budget for a group of people, and the costing and pricing will be based on a standard rate for those groups. And by standard rate, that could of course be a standard rate defined for this particular project, but in this case I have not defined any special rates for this project. I will select a group of people. I'll select technicians in this case. And we can then enter the number of hours required to perform each of the tasks. Let's say for specification, we need the technician for only a few hours to be part of a review. The client meeting, we will not need the technicians, but for the development phase, we might need, let's say, 40 hours of development time. And following that, there might be 40 hours of test time. Implementation time will be done mostly by a consultant, but I'll include a day of assistance from the technician. And for client test and approval, we will not need time from the technician. And I could continue this with additional groups, putting in also time for project management, consultants, etc. But let's leave it at this. In the project matrix, as mentioned, the hours are converted into both a cost side and a price side. I can view this here as well, seeing what is my estimated cost and what is my estimated price as well, giving me a total budget for the entirety of the project. This is also highlighted within my project plan now. I have my estimated costs. I have a total of that. And I can see the number of hours I have for each of the tasks. Currently, I do not have any values in my usage columns because we have not tracked any cost against this project as of yet. The next step would be to do planning of the resources. And for that, we will go to the resource plan. The resource plan or resource board can be opened from the role center. In here, we can see an overview of time. This is the first week that I'm going to plan for. And in here, I can import work assignments based on the budget that I've already created. I'll use the import button, budget functionality, and select the project that we just created down here for an ERP development project. And I can say OK, and I will get some assignments. It says 4 work assignments created. That aligns with the number of budget entries we created. And we see the first one of them coming in here, being 40 hours of time for an ERP development project. And that is placed on the group of technicians because we placed it on the resource group. What we see in this resource planner is the different individuals working in the company and grouped into the resource groups that they are part of. We also see color coding showing how many hours do we have unplanned for or overplanned for. In this example, we can see that looking at Connie, for instance, for the entirety of this week, she is in the green, meaning she's very close to being fully occupied, but not overly so. But looking at the details, we'll see that she has some overtime, both on Monday and Tuesday, but she has nothing to do on Wednesday, while Thursday and Friday are bang on exact number of hours she's capable of working. So this gives a very quick graphical view of this. Now back to our time from our budget for our ERP development project. It was on the level of technicians, but of course we need to assign it to somebody. And I can do that by dragging and dropping it down into Daniel. Now Daniel is assigned to do this work. And so on and so forth. I could do that week after week, doing replanning and assigning work. And of course, sometimes there isn't time to do something, and so we might need to postpone it. In this case, it would probably be better to switch over to a month view and see what does this look like in a bigger timeline and see, well, it looks like we don't have time to do this development until the following week. I can do this and drag it in here, and here it fits. This, of course, might not align with our overall plan. And so we can get back to our project and verify that indeed it does not align with our overall plan. Going back to the Gantt chart and seeing here that we have a red line, meaning this is a resource assignment, which does not track with the plan for when we were supposed to do testing. In this case, because we did not have the resources available, and so we might need to adjust our overall plan, moving everything out. And again, because everything is connected, that also moves out the following phases. With our project planned out, we can now start to actually perform some work. And when work is performed, we will have to track that in a timesheet. And I will open up my current timesheet. And here I can track my time. I can do that in different views. I will work here with a matrix view. And actually, I should switch over to my next timesheet because it is the next week. So let's see. This is a week I want to look at. In here, I can select a project and a task I worked on and put in the number of hours. I can also just type in the name of the customer. In this case, it'll find that I only have one project for that customer, so it will pre-fill that. And then I can select the task from my list of tasks. Maybe I worked on specification, and that was on one of these days, 3 hours of work, 3 hours here, etc. You put in the number of hours. If you need details, you can view this with the lines view, where you can put in more additional details into the description field of what you did. I can also import my work assignments as a basis for the time spent. So I can update with work assignments. And in this case, it pulls in whatever I had in my resource planning. And this adds up. And of course, I can adjust accordingly if this is not the actual number of hours I worked, even though that was what I was planned to do. In the end, I will submit my timesheet, and then it will go for approval. The approval process can be set up in different steps. In the system, it is set up to be a one-step approval by the project manager. And as I happen to be the project manager of the projects, I can see the time to be approved in time approval. I see here that I have a number of hours on different projects and tasks to approve. I could switch over to group this by resource, and this gives me the total time for one resource or for each resource, and I can see that this individual has submitted 38 hours. I can also drill down on the time and look at the details of each of them and reject or approve them individually if there's a need to, or I can do it at a high level and simply say approve all or approve some. If I reject the time, that time will of course come back to the original submitter of the timesheet with some comments about why it is rejected. Similarly, we can do the same for expense sheets. I happen to have an expense sheet already prepared, and this is what an expense sheet could look like. I've entered some lines for a project and a task. I've entered in what kind of expense it is, in this case, hotel costs, a description, a quantity, and a cost for it. And I can add attachment to them simply by opening this form. And if I'm on a mobile device, I can use the take picture functionality to take a picture of the receipt, or I can select a file that could be a PDF or a scan of the receipt I'm trying to claim. When I'm done, I can submit my expense sheet, and similar to the timesheet approval, that can also be an expense approval. In this case, I have direct approval for my expenses, so I don't need to go through an approval step. There could also be other kinds of costs in the project besides expenses and time. That could be incoming purchase invoices that needs to go in as project cost, and I can create a new purchase invoice. Let's create one for Fabricam. I'll put an invoice number on it. And let's say we are purchasing something. That could be items. It could be resource time, so sub-consulting. It could be any kind of expense items for something. It could be tickets, etc. The important part is that we track it to a project number by filling in the project number field, and we fill in the task that this is related to, and put in, of course, the quantity purchased and the price. By posting this cost will go to the general ledger, the accounts payable, just as any other business process, but it will also go to the project accounting, and it will be visible on the project. If there's a need for it, if there's budgeted for items or other kinds of expenses, it is possible to raise purchase orders or purchase invoices directly from the project based on the needs in the budget. So that would be a separate process, or that could be used as a driver for demand in demand planning, and you can do order planning based on the needs that arise from the project itself, and then raise orders against that. With the project posted, we now have time, we have expenses, and we have some purchases. Opening up the project again, we should be able to see that we now have usage cost incurred on the different activities. We also see for the specification part that we are going over budget, so we are getting a highlighted difference. In here, we could have enabled email alerts, and that would then automatically send out emails to the project manager as soon as we go over budget on any activity. We can also set a level of alert and say that it's even before we get to the full amount maybe at 80% or 90%, that's when we want to get an alert for it. We can of course also track this as quantities, which we see in here, that we had budgeted for 2 hours. We've used 6, meaning we've used 300% of the budget, and we are 6 hours over budget. Having done this, let's go to invoicing. And so from here, I can open up invoice suggestion to get a suggestion for what to invoice. Now, this whole project was a time material based project, so all the lines in here will be suggested as something to invoice. And we can see in here that I have my desk that I've purchased. I have 2 lines of work of 3 hours each. Herein, I can make changes. I can say that something is not chargeable. I can hold it for later invoicing by marking it as not approved. I can decide to do a write-off by selecting close line, or I can manually change the number of hours I want to invoice. So simply I could say we only want to invoice 2 out of the 3 hours on this line. I can also see a total of what we are going to invoice in total, so I have an idea of what the total invoice will be. Then I can create an invoice. Based on the template I selected initially, there will be a setup for the invoice which defines how this invoice will look. In this case, this template includes a grouping functionality, meaning it will group the time together based on who did the work. And we will see here on the invoice that we have one single line for Prakash for work in week 10 of 2024 for a total of 5 hours, the 5 hours being the sum of the 3 and the 2 hours I had because I deducted 1 hour not to be invoiced. And then of course we can post the invoice just as normal. And with that, we are basically through the end-to-end process. We have created a new project, we have planned for it, we have tracked time, we have tracked expenses, and we have invoiced for the entire project. And we are done at this point.